Coming to the stage is a journalist who has paved the way for not only herself, but for those who are coming behind her in the sports industry. She's an outspoken advocate for those whose voices are underrepresented in sports and politics. In 2018, she was named Journalist of the Year by the National Association of Black Journalists. And in 2019, she was named one of Worth's 21 most powerful women in the business of sports. Did I mention she's won multiple NAACP Image Awards? That's nice. She is a trailblazer, a contributing writer for The Atlantic, host and voice for this generation. She was truly unbothered. Please welcome to the stage, Jemele Hill.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your NAACP Image Award win. What is that like?
You are so funny.
What is that like?
Well,
Marquita worked down to the NAACP, and I still ain't won.
It's not for all. It's not for everybody. It's not. I have to say. Yeah, I'm sorry you don't know this feeling of being a twice nominated, multiple winner of said Image Awards.
One day I'm gonna win my Image Award. I won't rest. They can give me an Oscar, Tony, Emmy, Golden Globe, Pulitzer.
You're right.
If I don't win that Image Award, I will not rest.
All for nothing. It's all for nothing. I hear you. I get it.
So Jemele Hill is here with us. I have been a fan of yours for the longest. I'm trying to maintain my composure. I don't know if you remember this. You probably don't. When I worked at All Def, I saw you were eating lunch with your boss, and I stopped you. I was like, Jemele Hill, I'm such a big fan. And you were like, oh, this is great because I'm having a one-on-one with my boss right now, and this is great. And I was like, nice, man, hire her, give her a raise.
I
do all that. And I walked away.
Why did I not? I didn't connect 1 + 1.
Yep.
You're right.
That was me.
Remember
you remember?
I do remember.
Yeah, because I was trying to get you that little raise. I didn't know who you was talking to.
So thank you. It worked. Oh, my God. Now. You want one of my Image Awards? Because you can have it now.
I want to win my own.
All right.
I got to get out of the category where you vote for the people. I need to bribe the people who choose.
Well, you do have to. It does feel a little weird because there is some aspect of campaigning. I don't mean internally, but just with the public.
I know, Marquita. Marquita looking at me because I didn't campaign. The second I was hurt. I campaigned hard the first time and I lost the tab.
But I'm telling you, if you commit to it, and I put out a few selective posts and was just making sure that I kept it in the public consciousness. And then on my podcast, I mentioned go vote for me. My husband posted about it too. So it's like you do have to do a little bit of that.
I learned my lesson. Yeah. I didn't campaign the second time. The second one's on me.
Okay.
First one is on Tab.
Right.
Tab cried about her mom. I was like, I knew I lost then. I was like, I went and voted for her that day. I was like, well, God bless her. But anyway, let's talk about you. Let's go all the way back to the beginning.
Okay.
Jemele Hill, if you don't know, is from Detroit. What was it like growing up in Detroit?
Oh, I mean, Detroit is, I know that there are so many different perceptions of Detroit, most of them negative. Okay. Granted, it feels like we're coming out of that and that this is maybe one of the more positive stretches that we've gone through. But when I was coming up, the only time I ever saw Detroit on the national news was when the murder rate got released, and we were usually in the top 3. And when it was, there was this horrific tradition that we engaged in called Devil's Night. And so the night before Halloween, people would literally set buildings on fire, abandoned buildings. So it'd be like 600 fires in one night. And I'm not exaggerating.
Every
yes,
October
this was a deal for years, right?
Oh.
And finally, after some community involvement, a real intense focus on stopping this, it finally stopped. But that was the only time that I ever saw Detroit on TV. It was always for negative things. And I think because of the perception that Detroit has, we're not the cool city. Like people, Chicago's right next to us.
Yeah.
We know what, I ain't throwing shade, but we know Chicago doesn't have a tame murder rate either, right?
Right.
Okay. But Chicago, because they have so many other things that they're known for, that is a label that doesn't stick to them the same. New York, LA, every major city has crime.
Right.
But for Detroit, because we were never cool, we're never the spot to go to, that we had to deal with the brunt of that. And so it gives you a chip on your shoulder. And you always feel like you're going to prove people wrong, and you're going to show people that not just good things, but great things come from Detroit. We got a whole sound that came from Detroit.
I was about to say Motown.
Listen, Diana from there, Diana Ross. Okay. Yeah. We got Stevie. We got the whole Temptations.
And the gospel side, like Fred, the
Look, we running it in gospel.
Yeah.
Put some respect on us. The Clark sisters, the Winans family.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, these are gospel
royalty.
Foundational family.
Exactly. They're all from Detroit, all stayed in Detroit. A lot of them did. I mean, in my high school, I went to Mumford High School, and I remember when I told people that, some people recognized it from when Eddie Murphy wore the T-shirt in Beverly Hills Cop. It says Mumford Physical Education Department.
Yeah.
And people thought it was a fictional high school. I was like, no, we real. Okay. So that was my high school, and the Winans, like BB Winans went there.
Yep.
Big CC went there. A couple of the Clark sisters went there.
Fred
so, like,
went there.
Fred went
CP,
there. Yes,
Spice.
CP, yes, Spice. Like, you know it. Right?
I know. We had a lot of Detroit people here, and they all went. Is there other high schools in Detroit?
Yes, the most common high school people know is Cass Tech, because that's where Kenya Moore went. That's where Big Sean went. Unfortunately, we all. Kwame Kilpatrick went there too. People like to, Gladdy out, you know what I'm saying? Doing his thing.
Gladdy out.
But yeah, so there's a lot of, because Cass is the biggest high school in Detroit. So the odds there, and it's a high school you have to test into. So there's 3 high schools in Detroit you have to test into. It was Cass, Renaissance, and Martin Luther King Jr. So for a lot of people who, when you're in college, you usually run into somebody from one of those 3 schools.
Got it.
So
Got it.
yeah, but to answer your question about growing up in Detroit, it's a gritty city. It's a tough city. It's a prideful city. We take it seriously. Like, there's nothing, we put on for Detroit hard, because we know if we don't, no one else will. And so I carry that spirit with me in everything that I do, reminding people of where I'm from and how proud I am to be from this city, despite the negative perceptions it has.
Do you think that chip was valuable to you, because you came through, and we'll stay in your childhood, but I'm just curious, you came through a male dominated thing and you had to fight. Do you think that having that chip made it easier for you to navigate?
It did, because I didn't even realize what I was navigating until I got on bigger stages. Like, to me, it was just all kind of normal. When you're a girl growing up, and listen, I'm a mid-70s baby, to tell my age a little bit. So I grew up in the 80s, and it wasn't really fashionable for girls to be in the sports, right? It's that even though there were obviously female athletes that were dominant during that time, but on a neighborhood grassroots level, no, it wasn't. You were looked at as a bit of an oddity. So I've always had to be able to hold my own in the company of men, because I played sports, or I should say the company of boys at the time. So I was a neighborhood tomboy, and yeah, a lot of little boys would try you because they see a girl who is maybe as athletically comparable to them, especially at that stage before, sort of strength really matters.
Right.
And so, they don't want to get shown up by a girl. So you're going to get it tougher than other people will get it. And so it taught me how to hold my own. It taught me, just how to be resilient. And those were lessons that I carried through with me as I, sort of rose in the field of sports journalism.
It's so interesting, because my son plays competitive soccer, and he's really good. But at his age, these girls be beating the brakes off of them. They scrimmage against girls in their age group. It is no contest.
It's ugly.
It is.
Ugly.
I mean, he could be getting thrown around. I'm like, we scrimmaging girls? Night for y'all. Because these boys, it's 7-0, 8-0. It's just lights out. And the best basketball player I ever played against was a girl, Kendra, in North Carolina. She was just cooking us, crossing us over. Could have played for our team. It was just amazing. But I didn't think about it until you said it. Strength really is
then it separates, obviously, by the time they get to middle school, even a little bit before then. But girls and women are used to playing against boys, because most of us had to come up that way. Because if you come up in communities where they don't have a separate girls league or separate girls team, you have to play with the boys. So for us, it's a very comfortable environment, and I think it does teach you some great life lessons going forward, because most women will wind up in an industry that's dominated by men. So it teaches us how to navigate those spaces.
So what were you like as a kid? Were you shy, outspoken, introvert, extrovert?
I think I was brooding is what I was. So I mean, I'm one of those people that I can adapt to any situation. I was my husband messes with me because he was like Mr. Popularity in high school. And he was like, nobody knew you in high school. I was like, no, I was cool with everybody. I didn't have a specific clique necessarily. I was just kind of cool with everybody, minding my business, stay moisturized. That was kind of what I was on or whatever. But, I was always the kid who would get a great grade and a bad citizenship grade.
Right.
So the way we were graded, and I don't know if I'm sure this probably still doesn't exist, is that you get a letter grade, and then your citizenship would be a 1, 2, or a 3. So I was good for getting an A3, 3 being the worst citizenship because I'd be talking in class. And especially if it was a class that I didn't feel like challenged me. Like most kids, you get a little bored, you start engaging in clownish behavior, and then whatever. And so I wouldn't say necessarily I was an extrovert. I was somewhere in the middle because I've always been the type of person that when things bother me, I tend to keep them inside. But that's how writing became something that I loved is, I started off keeping journals. I was reading the newspaper because back in those days, there was no internet, no Google. So you had to keep up with your sports teams by reading the newspaper.
Wow.
So that got me into sports writing. And I was already somebody who loved to read. I journaled. And so it just kind of all came together for me when I got to high school, and I took a high school journalism class and never looked back.
So that was what, 10th grade? High school journalism class. What sort of clicked in your mind? What was it like? All those pieces of like, oh, this is sports journalism. I can put these two together and I'm in heaven.
That's exactly what it was. Is that because I read the newspaper, I knew it was possible, even though I didn't know in my immediate circle anybody who was a sports writer. So reading the newspaper was one sort of chain, in the overall link. But the other thing too was the way that newspapers, high school newspapers, are produced in Detroit was a huge factor. So the way it was done then is that all the high schools, their papers were produced by the professional paper, the Detroit Free Press. So once a month they put a special insert in the Detroit Free Press, which was the largest paper in Michigan, still is. And, you got to read what was happening at all the high schools. So we had to put together our paper by going to the professional newspaper.
Wow.
And so the first time I walked into a professional newsroom, I was just hooked. It was like a lot of activity, a lot of yelling, people running around. I was like, ooh, what is happening? And whatever's happening, I like it.
Yeah.
And so coming down there once a month exposed me. And then I got to know journalists that worked in the newsroom. And they had an apprenticeship program that took Detroit metro area students through a 10-week apprenticeship course where you got paid $10 an hour, which that was a lot in 1992,
$10 is solid.
Yeah, that's solid, right?
92?
Listen, 20 hours a week, 92. So once I got the apprenticeship, I was there at the paper for 6 weeks in the summer. And it converged with another, very divinely ordered thing, which is the National Association of Black Journalists. Their convention was in Detroit the same summer. And the person who was the curator of our program took all of us high school students, it was maybe like 12 or 13 when I was down to the NABJ convention, made us register as students, introduced us to a bunch of professional journalists, made us pass out our resume. We had to walk up to strangers and go, hi, my name is Jemele Hill. I'm 16. I go to Mumford High School and I want to be a journalist. We had to do that. That was the exercise she put us through because she wanted us to understand the ambition and drive that it takes. She wanted us to overcome the hurdle of having to talk to people you don't know because that's part of journalism is that you have to interview people you do not know. So that shyness you have to get over. And I became a student member, never looked back. And I got a job in the sports department when I was 16, answering phones and writing up summaries of high school games that happened. And again, I was very lucky because a lot of people, when they go through life, you change professions 3 or 4 different times, even more than that. You don't settle on things sometimes until later in life. I knew from the beginning what I wanted to do, and everything I did from that moment was about becoming the best sports writer I could. I hadn't even thought about television. Television was lame. The idea of doing TV was lame.
Lame?
Heck yeah, because realize print journalists and broadcast journalists, when I was coming up in the business, it was like Crips and Bloods. It's like, they over there, what set you claiming? Oh, KABC, what you got? KTLA, what you got? Like, that's how we looked at it. We looked down on broadcast journalists because we thought you and your little perfect hair, your little makeup, you ain't in these streets like we in these streets. Like, that's how we came up with that idea that TV was for shallow people. Then I saw them paychecks. I was like, I've been hustling backwards. I've been doing this wrong. It was, listen, I'm very honest with journalism students when I speak to them. I was like, oh no, it was the check that changed my mind. I'll be completely transparent. When I started doing it, I loved it. And it wasn't until I got to ESPN, but I never came into the game wanting to be on TV at all. My dream job was to work at Sports Illustrated. That was my dream job.
I remember as a kid, Sports Illustrated was like
everything.
It was we used to get the magazines, or I used to take them from the dentist office or whatever.
See what I'm saying?
But it was like that was
it.
The creme de la creme of sports. And the newspaper was, I mean, if we're a little bit older, TV was dope, but Sports Center wasn't a thing for a long time.
Yeah.
Like ESPN grew and started and grew. But I remember like locally, it was the newspaper. Mm-hmm. You found out things about the newspaper, and then the local news, and then the national, news. But I never thought about print journalists being like, you dirty little television host.
And they looked at us like the same way, like you and your poverty walking around here. It's your poor little notepads. I mean, they looked at us the same way. It was no different. And then come to find out, especially when you're first starting out at TV and you're in a local market, you in market 182 or something, man, you might be making, and this is not an exaggeration, like $14,000 a year. When I graduated from college, the average salary for a professional journalist was $19,000.
$19,000?
Newsweek did a list of top 100 professions. Journalism was 98. We got beat by log rolling. I'm not even kidding.
Literally log rolling?
Literally log rolling. It was like log rolling. It beat us,
My
right?
God.
And so I don't even remember what was behind us, but I'm like, man, it must have been like serial killer. Like what is work? Like this is not good.
Dang.
And friends of mine, like when my first job out of college, I was working at the News and Observer in Raleigh, and I made 22. And but I had friends of mine on the broadcast side. Like one of my friends, he was working in a local market, and he was making $12,000 a year. So that is like not unusual. And so that is why it's so interesting for me to see now that young people actually think you can make money doing this. Not saying you can't, but it's because they see a Stephen A. Smith, or they see some of a Don Lemon, and they think like, oh.
I want to take a quick break from the show to talk to you about our podcast sponsor for today's episode, BetterHelp. Listen, people don't always realize that physical symptoms like headaches, teeth grinding, and even digestive issues can be indicators of stress. And let's not forget about doom scrolling, sleeping too little, sleeping too much, undereating, and overeating. I know somebody that does that. Listen, I teeth grind. I undereat. I don't undereat. I overeat. But I've gotten better with BetterHelp, because now I understand the reasoning behind my stress and overeating and how I use food to cope. I didn't realize the source of the impetus of how I use food to deal with things I don't want to deal with. And now I do, and that's because of BetterHelp. Stress shows up in all kinds of ways. In a world that's telling you to do more, sleep less, and grind all the time, here's a reminder to take care of yourself, do less, and maybe try some therapy. I've been doing this for almost 2 years with BetterHelp. I've seen a tremendous response in the way I parent, the way I husband, and the way I present myself as a person. I had all these triggers and unhealed wounds and trauma. And now it's not that I don't have that stuff, it's that I know how to deal with that stuff, and I know where it's coming from, and that is a better life. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in-person therapy. It's more convenient. It's more efficient. Give it a try and see if online therapy can help lower your stress. Coming to the stage listeners, get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/stage. That's BetterHelp.com/stage. And now back to the show.
That's what I'll make. They represent the 1% of.
That's literally the LeBron and Steph of journalism.
That profession. Yes, exactly. Most journalists, it's a working class profession. And what people make in local markets, the LA Times is different. It's a major newspaper. Mm-hmm. But smaller publications, like, they're not making salaries that are, anywhere close to the level of what you can make in television.
So that's why, and then that kind of declined, because I remember when I was in high school, this is just broke my heart. I never forgave the newspaper industry for failing. But in my schools, like the Lakewood Journal was what you would be in. And I was like, it's my senior year. I'm going to see my clips. And they were like, the Lakewood Journal is over. And I was like, who going to talk about me then?
So this is why I tell people one of my soapboxes is please support local journalism. And that's why, because USA Today is great. The LA Times is great. Washington Post, New York Times, they're all great. But they cover the country, if not the world. They're not going to cover who's the best athlete at the high school that's in your community.
Exactly.
Or some of the community issues that are going on. And so when I hear people sort of recoil at the idea of paying for a subscription service, like I must be subscribed to like 20 newspapers. And I do it because I think supporting local journalism is really important. And so people don't understand that despite the foolishness you may see in journalism, the original purpose of this profession was a very simple phrase that was often repeated to me as I was a young journalist. We are to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. That is the whole point of journalism, is you're holding people in power accountable. And when you think about the things you wouldn't know if not for journalism, take being here in LA, if not for a wonderful series that the San Jose Mercury News did, people wouldn't know that it was the government flooding crack into the neighborhoods. That was a journalist discovery.
Man.
Okay. And so when you think about all the things we know, from the opioid crisis to big pharma to all of this, it all started in journalism. And so that is why we need to support local journalism, because that's often what spurns national conversation and national action. Off my soapbox.
That was a good soapbox, because I didn't even know it was that newspaper that did that. I actually don't remember where I got that information from. I didn't realize it was a journalist. That is also just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, as black folks, we get blamed for everything. I was like, bro, we don't have no planes. How we finna get the crack from over there to over here?
Nino Brown said it on the stand. We should have listened.
God,
we flying those guns over here, Ms. Hawkins. I mean, we know these are all this is why the democracy cannot function without a free press.
Right.
It cannot function without one.
Absolutely. So let's go from Mumford to Michigan State. Now, Michigan State, you are a very proud
for the
Spartan alum. I mean, you take all the barbs from Michigan State, Ohio State, Michigan. You go hard. So talk to me about, like, you say you grew up at Michigan State. What do you mean by that?
Well, like most young people, when you get to college, you have a very limited understanding of personal responsibility. And then in college, once it's on you, you have to be the one waking up for class.
Yep.
Mama ain't gonna come shake you. That's not gonna happen. You're putting your schedule together. I mean, you really are living. You have some bills. They ain't grown people bills, but you're living as close to a grown person as possible. And so there I had to grow up a lot. One, I was coming from a city that at the time was 90% black. So my interaction with white people on a daily basis was extremely limited, to say the least. Okay. I knew them, I knew they existed. They were around.
Like a squirrel. Like a white person. Nice. Anyway.
And working at the Free Press as a high school teenager, of course I interacted with white people, but to be like only surrounded by white people, that was different. So
was it like a culture shock for you?
Huge culture shock. I mean, I don't know what I was thinking. When I went to Michigan State, I never, even though there were a couple people from my high school who went there, I never thought about like rooming with them, because I mean, we were cool, but we didn't know each other like that. So I never thought about it. And so I went in blind. So I was just like, I'll just get assigned. And in my mind, I was thinking like, they don't know I'm black, and they was gonna probably put me with somebody black. That was not the case. I walk in the door and there's two white girls, and I'm like, okay, we gonna be close. All right, I got you. So it was a rooming situation. They call it triple, because it was 3 to a room. We're overcrowded the first week.
That's how it was for me too.
Yeah, exactly. They know that there are folks that are not gonna show up, and then within a couple weeks they figured it out. So I then had a single, and my suite mates, they were from a area in Michigan called Sterling Heights, which is a suburb of Detroit. But growing up, we used to call it Sterling Whites, right? Because there's a lot of white people there. Yeah. And I think about it, I write about this. I have a memoir coming out in the fall, and I write about this a lot, is that, the conversations that we had then were really fascinating. And the good thing is that we didn't know what we didn't know, so we were able to lay it on the table in a way.
Right.
And so when we had the hair conversation, it's like one of the funniest things ever.
The hair conversation?
Yes, because they were like, the grease, explain.
Explain?
And I was like, the washing of it every day, explain. Why is it that when I step in our bathroom, I feel like a chihuahua was murdered in this in this shower. Chewbacca, did he get in the shower? Like, why do y'all have so much hair? Why y'all wash it all the time? So that was like truly eye-opening. And I was like, oh, now I get it. Right. And then especially one of my suite mates, she started dating a black dude that she couldn't tell her parents about. And I'm telling you, I'm so glad reality TV didn't exist then, because we would have made a show. 100% we would have made a show. So, being exposed to not just white people, but other cultures in general, like having my first experiences, having LGBTQ friends, like that happened in college. And so even though when people say, oh, college is an academic environment, but I think socially what you learn is really important, especially going to a predominantly white institution. I mean, like Michigan State has 40,000 students. And black people maybe would have been 2,500 to 3,000. So we were a serious minority. Yeah. And so that's why I say, like, I grew up in a lot of ways because, the combination of where I was from, being exposed to different cultures, being a student journalist, and being exposed to levels of history I was unaware of. One of my favorite classes I took was history class just about African American women. What I always, I remember everything that I, a lot of the things I learned, but shamefully, so one of my study partner was a white dude. He got a better grade than I did.
Oh my! In African American women?
Yes, African American women's history. Man, I was like, damn. Harriet rolling in her grave right now. It's the truth. I was like, he got a better grade than me. He got like a 3.5. I got like a 2.5. I was like,
Jemele, you is a woman.
I know. You would think. See,
that didn't help none.
What had happened was I was working 60 hours a week at the newspaper, and so
in college?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was
60 hours a week.
60 hours a week, easy.
Hold on.
Oh yeah. Easy.
That's why I feel like grades got to be it's a cumulative scale. If you ain't got to work 60 hours, our grade can't be the same. But how is you working 60 hours and going to college?
It's the nature. Like one semester I had to drop down to 9 credits because of my responsibilities at the paper, and I was there at Michigan State on an academic scholarship too.
Oh wow.
And so but that's the nature of journalism. Hence why it's not a profession for everybody. Is that it's a lot of work for often little pay. I was working those hours, and my first semester I got paid $55 a week. Okay, so talk about hustling backwards. No, I literally picked a profession with the intention of being poor. I'm not even kidding. I was like,
well, so you really got to love journalism to do it.
You have to love it. And I say this all the time, particularly the younger journalists, is that you can't love this profession for what it brings you. You have to love it when it's at its hardest, when it's not easy to do, when it's at its most difficult. I love this profession the same way I do now when I was making $30 a story freelancing for the Lansing State Journal. I love it the same.
$30 a story?
$30 a story. A story that would probably take me a day and a half to report. Okay. So yes, it is. That's the foundations of it. Now,
is it better now for people writing articles for magazine?
Depends on where you are. Depends on who you're writing for. Like, obviously the big publications, you can get $2-3 a word, which is great. So for a story, for a cover story, you might be able to get paid, anywhere between $3,500 and $5,000, which is great. But if you're freelancing for a local paper that has a readership of like 60 or 70,000, no, maybe you might get $100. You hope.
100. You get Uber for that.
I mean, listen, I bet you driving Ubers and Lyfts has saved probably a number of journalism careers. I bet you it has. I would not be shocked. Because it allows you to, be a gig worker and just work based off when you can work. But that was not the case. That's what I signed up for. And so I'm working all these hours, and I considered school outside of my journalism classes to be a bit, disposable. Right. So my attendance wasn't the greatest sometimes. And in that class, as much as I signed up for it was an elective. Yeah. And I was like, I want to take this class. I want to learn about more African American women and history and power dynamics than I already know. And the professor, she demanded a lot, as she should have. The reading for that class was crazy. So sometimes I didn't always have the time.
Yeah, you was at work.
Because I was at work a lot of the time. And, you know, I mean, it was what it was. So when my white study partner got a better grade.
Now I understand.
I was like, oh, this is so. But I can't even give the excuse of time because he was a college athlete.
Okay, so, Jemele, I was trying to help you.
I know.
I was
know.
really. I had it for you right there.
You gave me a life raft, and I just threw it back. I was like, "Let me drown, bro. Let me drown."
No, he actually was doing
I deserve that shame. I do.
So you graduate college, and then you get your first. You know, your career begins at the Raleigh News Observer. As a sports writer, what kind of things were you covering? What was that like?
So this is 1997, and it just so happened I started as an intern, number one. So and the reason I chose to go there is because they had a track record for hiring their interns, and it was a paper that had recently won a Pulitzer. They had a great reputation for developing young writers, so that I went there very intentionally. I turned down a 2-year. It was a 2-year internship that I turned down to go there because I didn't want to be an intern for another 2 years.
Right.
I wanted to be a full professional and find a city and live there because the 2-year internship is that I would have lived in Detroit 1 year. The next year I would have had to live in Charlotte and hope for the best after it was over. So, yeah, in this time actually was a great time for women's sports. And so when I got there, they told me that's what they wanted me to focus on. And I know for a moment, I was thinking, like, am I being tokenized here because I'm a black woman? And like, oh, why don't you go cover women's sports? But looking around what was happening at the time, like the North Carolina women's soccer team at that point, they had won 14 straight national titles.
Was that when Mia Hamm was there?
It was right after Mia Hamm.
Okay.
It was the next generation after her.
Got it.
And you also had very strong basketball programs with North Carolina State, North Carolina, and Duke because they're all in the same area.
Yeah.
The triangle, as they call it. And you also had a young rising track star named Marion Jones, she had just won a national title with North Carolina women's basketball. And she had turned pro, and people were upset because I think she only played 1 year at North Carolina. They won a title off a last-second shot. And this was during a time where Tennessee was dominating everything.
Yeah.
So for them to win that title was a big deal. So there was a lot of great things happening with women's sports. And once I understood that, I was able to do some really amazing stories. And the beauty of covering women's sports, and I talk about this, is like women's sports launched my sports writing career because women, most of the women athletes, not used to being covered like the guys are. So they're a little more open. Your access is tremendous. Like I could go to any practice I wanted at any time. Let me try to go to, at the time, Vince Carter and Antoine Jameson were in North Carolina.
I remember this time.
Yeah.
I was living in North Carolina at that time.
Trajan Langdon was at Duke.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, try to get access to a Coach K practice. Good luck with that.
Right.
Meanwhile, the Duke women or NC State women or North Carolina women, I can show up anytime, watch the whole practice, right? And that is what you want as a journalist. So it allowed me to write some really personal, great stories about many of the athletes there. And, you know, I won a Press Association Award for Best Feature.
Man, you just be winning awards.
You know, but here's the funny thing is I never am the one who wants to apply for them. It's usually somebody else that convinces me to do it because I'm like, I don't really feel like it. And in that case, it was my sports editor. And I had done a story. I'd gone to the Citadel and done a story about the first female athlete because this was after Shannon Faulkner because, you know, when women integrated the Citadel, like that was a big thing in the early 90s. And it didn't work out for her. But then slowly they started integrating more women.
What's the Citadel?
The Citadel is an all-male, or was an all-male military academy.
Oh, okay. Got it.
In South Carolina, in Charleston. And it was a big deal in, I think it was late 80s, early 90s. Shannon Faulkner actually fought in court to integrate for women this all-male academy. And it was like crazy. And she actually wound up dropping out after, like, because she got hated so bad when she was there.
I
like,
get it.
Her family got, you know, threatened, all this stuff, but they kind of came out of that, and then they started slowly bringing in more women. So there was one woman from North Carolina, from Fayetteville, and she was the first female athlete they ever had. So I went down there, hung out with her, did a story on it, and won an award. So, you know, those are the things along your path that you remember, is that like kind of that early foundation that you got. And that's where I learned about really how to be a writer.
Yeah.
And
you're still a writer.
Yes.
I want that to be clear. Like, you podcast, you do TV and stuff, but I read your stuff all the time. You still write frequently.
Because writing was my first love. And even though television and other mediums have certainly been able to bring me a lot of attention and a bigger profile, writing was at the core of everything that I did.
Okay, so talk to me about, after the Raleigh News and Observer, you went back to Detroit, and you got to work at the Detroit Free Press. Was that like a full circle moment for you, or are you just like, I'm going to go do these other 60 hours that I did in college?
Well, by that time, I was making more than $55 a week. Okay, let it be known. Well, the thing was, I didn't really want to go back to Detroit that soon, because I was just away for 2 years. And I always had this fear that, if I start off in Detroit, I'm never going to leave here. And so I wanted to kind of explore the country, if not the world.
Yeah.
But to be honest, the offer was really tempting. It's like to go back to cover Michigan State football and basketball, to be able to cover national and international events. It was very tempting. It came with a $25,000 pay raise. Also very good.
Pay raise?
Pay raise, yes.
Man.
So it came with a big pay raise. And then I would be living in Lansing, because I was covering Michigan State. So big pay raise, cost of living is so cheap. And I was like, ooh, this really does work out. This math is mathing right now.
This really does work out after all.
And obviously covering my alma mater, because I had been a sports writer when I was in college. So I knew the terrain. A lot of the same people were still there. At that time, Tom Izzo is the head coach. I knew him when he was an assistant, and not just the assistant, the lowly assistant.
Really?
Yeah.
He is still the coach, too.
He's still the coach.
If y'all don't know, he's still the coach.
Yeah, and I had known Tom since I was a student, because I actually took coaching basketball in college, which was taught by the head coach, Judd Heathcote, and the person who filled in for him when he couldn't make certain classes was Tom Izzo.
Really?
So it's like, yeah, it was full circle in a lot of ways. I established a relationship with the Free Press since I was in high school, and I had a lot of good relationships in there. So coming back, felt really natural and normal. And I was there for 6 years, and I got to do some amazing things, because this is when Michigan State's basketball program took off. They won. They went to their first Final Four since Magic in '99.
Mateen Cleaves?
Mateen Cleaves, yep. I covered him. And so they went in '99, lost to the Duke team with Trajan Langdon. And at 2000, they win it all. They went to 4 straight Final Fours.
Yeah, they were popping for a minute.
They were popping big time. And then also at the same time, the Pistons were really good.
Yeah,
they won in 2004. I covered because they went to the Eastern Conference Finals, I feel like 5 or 6 times in a row.
Yeah.
It's them in Indiana, and always tussling for supremacy in the Eastern Conference. So once the Michigan State sports season was done, I would then pivot to covering the NBA playoffs, and that was my first exposure doing that, which was great. I covered the Olympics in 2004. I got sent on the Olympics team, so I got to spend 3.5 weeks in Greece. So all these,
you was doing all right.
I was, and then this is back to when newspapers spent money to cover things. So I got to go when it was the Bowl Championship Series, when it was the BCS. I covered 6 straight of those. It was great. Yeah, so I got,
as a little girl sports fan, you are like, these are not just events. These are the events.
Hey, I was there when that Miami-Ohio State game in 2001 that went to triple overtime where Willis McGahee blew out his knee.
Yeah.
I was there. There's so many I was there moments, when that happened. And it really gave me the confidence to know that I didn't have to limit myself to thinking of myself as a local sports writer. I could be a national sports writer. And so, especially covering the Olympics.
Because those are national. Those things are national. I guess because of the Detroit connection,
right?
But everybody knows those games and tournaments and Olympics is a global thing.
Olympics is global, and the way that it worked is the owner of the newspaper, because the Free Press was part of a newspaper chain, Knight Ridder, which owned the Philadelphia Inquirer, Charlotte Observer, like 20 or 30 some newspapers across the country, and they organized an Olympic team. Send everybody to where the Olympics are, and then you're with your colleagues from all across these different papers. And that was some real training. That was the first time I met Stephen A. Smith, was at the Olympics.
In 2004?
In 2004, I remember very vividly. I was in the bureau where all of us, where we all worked out of, and this very loud person comes in and he's like, I can't believe you got me in these accommodations. It's like a prison in there. And not like going in. I was like, who is this man? And what is he talking about? I mean, when I tell you he was coming in there and letting people have it, because the way it works is that the Olympic Committee sets aside housing for sports, those who are covering the Olympics. And let's just say they're not trying to put us in anything luxurious. I got the better end because I was at a Best Western and I was happy as hell. And I was at the Best Western in Athens and I was like, okay.
There's a Best Western in Athens?
It was, and it was slapping too. It was slapping. They, like, instead of giving me a full bed, they just put two twins together. Yeah. And it was like, okay.
Put one sheet on. Right. It'll feel like a full bed. Like Hush, stay on one
like
side.
Like, you feel that divide? But it's okay. I'm gonna ignore it. Right. But yeah, no, he was at the time a columnist and lead NBA writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And people who watch Stephen A. now probably don't realize how good of a reporter that he was. Like he covered Allen Iverson, and the way he covered, the NBA and Iverson in particular is what launched his career.
I knew he was there. I didn't realize it was specifically Iverson is what, launched it. Because the newspaper at that time, you don't really get the newspaper that's not in the city you live in.
Correct.
I was in Tacoma. You get the Tacoma News Tribune and the Seattle Times.
Yep.
And the USA Today is it. So you don't have access to this before the internet.
This wasn't a thing then for you to know about leading columnists from other areas. Now, because of Twitter, because of social media, you know who's writing what in different pockets of the country. But that was not the case then. And I think people just generally have a tendency to believe when you wind up at ESPN that you were born there. I don't know why that is. I'm like, no, we led whole other lives before we actually got here.
So before we get to ESPN, I read that you were a sports columnist for the Orlando Sentinel.
That is correct.
And you were the first or the only African-American female sports columnist in the country at that time?
In North America.
In North America?
Not just the country. It was North America. Yeah, it was 305 daily newspapers in the U.S., Canada, Mexico.
Wow.
Okay. And I was the only black woman who was a sports columnist at a daily. And, that's one of those statistics that is not something to be proud of. Not for me, but for the industry.
Right.
Because it is a reflection of where they have failed. Because, listen, I think I'm a pretty good writer. I ain't that damn good. Where I would be to be the
in the whole continent.
The only one.
In the whole, from the top
it's just me.
Of Canada to the bottom of Mexico, it's just you.
It's just me. And, it was crazy because I never saw myself as being a columnist. When I left Detroit, the reason why I even applied for this job, I had two friends that were working there who just convinced me. They just put on the hardcore sale for me to apply for the job. And also, I was looking around the industry. At that point, the newspaper business was starting to shrink a little bit because newspapers made incredible profits for a long time because of advertising. So they're seeing profit margins of like between 20 and 30%. Like many of it's crazy, right? They went through a huge boom. Hence why when I was at the Free Press, they like, go cover the BCS national title game, even though there's nobody from Michigan in it. Right. Like, go do that. Like, that's how they was spending money, The price of the brick was going up. All right? So,
I'm rewatching The Wire right now.
So you get it.
That really hits.
You get it, right? So they had that. You know what? When you watch The Wire, pay attention to the drug names. What they call the drugs.
Death Grip.
Pandemic was one.
Pandemic was one.
And I was
pandemic, 2 for 2.
Get that pandemic. So newspapers they had that pandemic at the time, but the business was starting to shrink, and the profit margins were coming down, and there was belt tightening that was going on, and I wanted to write books eventually. I wanted to, maybe think about doing radio, other platforms. I still wasn't thinking about TV. But a lot of the columnists in Detroit who were a big deal, they had radio deals, book deals, all that. And that's what convinced me to apply. I made a business decision. I didn't make a journalist decision. Wow. Yeah, and also another pay raise was involved.
So wait, you talking about the Sentinel still?
Yeah. So that's why I jumped to the Sentinel. Like, even though column writing was not on my vision board, I did it because strategically it made a lot of sense.
So for those of us who may not know, mainly the viewers, what is the difference between a reporter and a columnist?
So, one, in terms of position, columnists are considered to be the senior writers of the section or of the paper.
Okay.
So they're going to make more money usually than most reporters because their face is out there. Like, it's not just about, oh, such and such thinks the Lakers stink. It's Jemele Hill thinks the Lakers stink. Right. So then you become attached to what you say, and then you're giving your opinion.
Got it.
You're giving it in a way that's hopefully reported. That, because you can have a reported opinion piece where to justify or to make your argument more concise and powerful, you talk to people who support what you're saying.
Yeah.
But that is, that's the role of the columnist. Is like they're, in many ways, usually they become the face of the paper because you grown up in Tacoma. Like, I know there had to be one columnist or two columnists that everybody knew where they wrote.
Absolutely.
Right. So in every city, there's like somebody who is like here in LA, Bill Plaschke. He's been here forever.
What up, y'all? I want to take a quick break from the show and talk to you about our sponsor for today's episode, the Crew League Season 3 from Revolt TV. Watch your favorite artists step on the court in Season 3 of the Crew League from executive producers Sean Diddy Combs and Chris Brown. This fast-paced original series showcases hip-hop's biggest stars and their crews competing on the hardwood to win $200,000 cash prize. A $200,000 cash prize? Oh my God. You got to see it, y'all. Watch Chris Brown, Anuel, Tusi, NLE Choppa, G Herbo, YK Osiris, and more battle it out for the chip. These rosters are bigger and better than ever, with heated rivalries and stars seeking revenge from falling short. See who makes the finals and who gets sent home. Only one team will walk away on top, with your hosts Aiden Ross and Buster Scher providing the play-by-play and sideline reporting from Gorilla Nims. That's enough entertainment, excitement, and surprises to keep you at the edge of your screen. Big-time moments call for big-time players. Find out which rapper turned hooper is really calling the shots. Listen, stream episodes of the Crew League Season 3 exclusively on the Revolt app, YouTube, and watchrevolt.com. Follow at Revolt on Instagram and TikTok for exclusive content and behind-the-scenes clips. Don't miss this, guys. It's hoop season all around. Crew League Season 3. Watch it. Now back to the show. Yeah.
Right? He's been writing for the LA Times forever. And so that's why columnists are typically paid more.
You know what's interesting? I don't know what this says about me or the newspaper industry. I learned more columnists from around the horn than any other way.
Yep.
That were like Bill Plaschke paper, Woody paper, Bob Bryan. All this was from around the horn. Otherwise, prior to that, you don't know who's not in your city or the city you lived in.
That was something I noticed too when I made that decision. I was like Around the Horn was starting around that time, and I was like, they're all on TV. They all have these book deals. Like, they're the ones kind of making money,
right?
Like in this operation. Right. So I decided to go to Orlando for that.
So how did you get from Orlando to ESPN? I think it's really interesting. You said you think people are born at ESPN. People come and go. There's been a lot of columnists, reporters, talent come. Kevin Frazier, we were talking about prior to this, was at ESPN. Now has moved on. What made you decide, or how did you get there? What is that even like? Are you recruited?
I was recruited, and it was funny. The reason I was recruited is because of a simple phrase, baby mama.
What?
Yes, this is true. So when I was in Orlando, one of the biggest transitions that was a challenge was I was going from a city in Detroit that had every major sport, hockey, basketball, baseball, football. Orlando didn't. Orlando had one professional sports team at the time, the Orlando Magic.
Yep.
So automatically, you start thinking as a writer, like, what am I going to write about? Very big into college football. So Florida was covered, Miami, Florida State, but especially University of Florida because Gainesville was much closer to Orlando.
Yep.
So they kind of had two seasons, the NBA and college football. They would do some NFL because the Bucks have been somewhat recently successful in Tampa, Orlando, maybe an hour and a half. So in the summer, where there was nothing to write about, I came up with a series called Writing With, where pretty simple, get in a car with an athlete of notice or of prominence, rather. I interview them, we video it, we slap it on the website, easy Q&A, fills a news hole, right? Because my day was Tuesday. I had to have Tuesdays and Sundays were my column days. So the first person I did was Willis McGahee. And I went down to Coral Gables. We're doing the interview in his BMW. He's driving us around, and I knew he had a couple baby mamas, right? And me being messy, I was like, so Willis, what's the difference between a baby mama and a wife? Right? Like, I'm really just goofing around. And his answer was hysterical. He's like, oh, baby mama's the worst. He started going in on baby mamas. And I'm thinking this content is hysterical. So we printed, because we had an online version and a print version. We printed. The editor of the Orlando Sentinel is pissed because of the baby mama terminology. She this old white woman that ain't never heard of baby mama in her whole life. And I got called into the principal's office, me and my editor, and had to apologize for using the term baby mama.
Really?
I did. So where ESPN gets involved is a friend in Orlando was very close with an executive at ESPN, a black executive. And he used to, my friend in Orlando used to tell me, he called me J Money. He was like, J Money, you going to wind up at ESPN. I'm telling you. When you do, you got to let me manage you. Right? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. So his boy that was the executive came to town and he was like, you two should have dinner because I've been sending him your stuff. We do have dinner. First thing he brings up is the baby mama thing.
Oh, my God.
Because it went viral as much as you could be viral then because some other blogs picked it up, like everything. And he's like, well, that was hilarious. And, whatever. And I was like, oh, my gosh. And so he's like, hey, what do you think about coming up to Bristol to interview? Because we have a columnist opening for ESPN.com because Skip Bayless is leaving writing and he's going to be doing television full time and not writing. And I said, sure. And I went up there and the rest is history. So the same thing that kept me down.
Come on and bless him.
Is what made me rise. Won't he do it?
Won't he do it? That is crazy.
This is what happened.
That is a very specific story. Nobody else on the planet Earth has your ESPN story.
I got in there because of baby mama. That's how I got in there. And and it is important. The origin story is important just in the sense of, I think, when you're a black journalist in particular. And this is why the late Stuart Scott was so incredibly impactful, is the same things that the executives at ESPN used to deride and criticize him for. We knew what he was doing, and he became a cultural icon.
Absolutely.
Because of that, because he was saying things like cooler than the other side of the pillow and booyah, and bringing all the ways that we talk when we're amongst ourselves to a national spotlight. That same thing that made it so much more difficult for Stewart early on at ESPN is what made him a star. You know what? That is so. That's what I think attracted me to you. It was like, just like Stewart. Like, we use the term regular black. And what we mean by that is, like, you see a black person, you may not know much about them, but you be like, but I know him. That's a regular black person. I mean, they might be on TV. They might be the president of the United States, but they probably can play spades. They're probably good at taboo. They bring something. That's how I judge people. Wait, is taboo now a part of? Oh, regular black? If you ain't good at taboo, you ain't regular black to me. Ooh. Or you can be not good and know it. And be like, hey, I don't really play taboo because, black folks' taboo is serious business. It is serious business. Spades is the most serious of business. You know what I think is challenging spades and most serious is Uno. Yeah. I think more fights break out over Uno now than spades. Because everybody can play Uno. Correct. Everybody can't play spades, and so people avoid it. Yes. Everybody can play Uno. Yeah. And it'd be like, you question someone's character for a draw 2 or draw 4. And then the rules are so different. Oh, my God. This is why I follow the Uno account just to shade them. Because the Uno is... Are you one of those black people who tell Uno about that they are wrong? Because they are wrong. We made your game hot, okay? So we get to determine how it's played. So when they were like, no stackables, I'm like, no, that's not how we do it. It's going to be some stackables. Black folks told Uno, just make the cards. We'll take care of the rule. You keep printing the cards out. We'll determine the rules. Oh, but that new Uno, they trying to tear families apart. With the empty? With the empty, and you could trade, and because you got to switch hands. That switch hands is worse than draw 4. I was like, man, somebody going to get fired on. This is going to be too much. But now I know taboo is part of regular black. Taboo is part of regular black. And I think that's what that's what connected a lot of us to you. It was like, okay, this is like our homegirl is on TV. And, I love Dan Patrick and Kenny Mayne and all that. But what Stuart Scott was like, okay, now that's, and I feel like he's the one that made catchphrases a thing at ESPN. Then everybody had their own, thing. And then was you coming in. It was like, okay, now we feel like
we can watch ESPN and feel, at home. But did you feel like you were breaking, because there was other black women there prior? But
it was like Robin Roberts, Danielle Sargent, but it was different because I was one of the first, I may be the first, I don't know, to host a show where my opinion drove the show. Like I wasn't a traditional anchor. The SportsCenter thing came later after me and Michael Smith had, we had his and hers.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit of a different space. And one thing that I've told people, like on his and hers, when you're in the moment, you don't realize what you're doing. Like I can't believe they let us put some of that stuff on TV. I really can't. I was like, y'all really let us do a Boys in the Hood skit on ESPN.
It was great though.
Where we said keep them, them babies out the street. That literally happened on ESPN. I was like, I drank a real 40.
It was real?
It was real.
What?
Listen,
I thought you put apple juice in it.
Why? I'm an actor. I got to sell this, okay? Now we sent one of our production assistants to the store, and I was like, get some more liquor. Give me a 40. Bring it on air. If it's not a real 40, what are we doing?
Oh my God! I never thought it was real.
It was real.
I thought it was apple juice and like club soda. Mm-hmm. You were like old English.
Get that? I think it was Core 45. I think that's what it was.
45.
That's right. But
wow.
But no, our entire mentality was that if we gonna go down, we gonna go down our way.
Yeah.
And we never wanted to do anybody else's idea of what we should be on TV. Mm-hmm. And, as Michael would always say, they will learn to like it. And he was right.
Yeah.
And so when we started doing the skits, which, again, that came from a place of people, our producers, not actually liking the fact that when we would talk about sports, we would often, probably to a very annoying degree, especially if you weren't black and in the culture, we would always reference black movies. Like we get some boomerang quotes going, the Wood, Brown Sugar, Richard Lawson. Like I was like, little did I know that this was all gonna come in handy. So we would always reference it. And one of the producers said to us, like, hey, people, I don't know that they get all the references that you guys make, and you might be turning off your audience and this and that. To which I said, well, I watch Chris Berman, and he makes about 100 references I do not know. He's talking about films and movies, or films and records from the 60s and 70s. I don't know them.
None.
And he is considered a legend. So I think they will live. If they got to go watch The Wood to watch our show, so be it. Okay? If they got to go watch House Party to watch us, it is what it is. And from there, it actually wound up being the best commercial for the show because another producer, it was Eddie Murphy, I believe it was his 50th birthday. And we saw that NFL Live, it was some anniversary of The Princess Bride, which I've never seen, but I understand it's...
Yeah,
I understand its cultural influence. They did an entire show making Princess Bride references, like changed the topic bars, everything, did all of that. And so we were thinking, like, let's do the same thing, but do Coming to America.
Yeah.
And one of our producers, white, he's like, no, let's really go all in. Let's do a skit, because it was the year that Floyd and Manny Pacquiao were fighting. It was the Kentucky Derby. Ronda Rousey was fighting. It was like one of the best sports weekends of the year was coming up. And we came up with the idea to change the barbershop scene to reflect it in modern day, but still using the old characters. And it was... it was a huge turning point for the show, because when people saw that Coming to America skit, Arsenio saw it, and he could not believe a sports show did this.
Really?
We went all in. We rented out a barbershop for like 6 or 7 hours. We asked people to freely give their time. Robert Flores, a former ESPN anchor who has since moved on, I think, to the MLB Network. He sat in makeup for hours to play the old Jewish guy, right? Mm-hmm. We're asking people to do this for free.
Yeah.
Okay? We're not paying anybody. And we're doing this outside of having a daily show. But we were so committed to wanting this to be well done and to, frankly, to just highlight black culture. And everything that we did after that was us just being ourselves and us saying we can break these television rules. Like, who cares? So when they offered us the chance to do SportsCenter, we were like, have they seen the show? Like, do they know?
Not only Sports Center, the 6 p.m.
The 6 p.m.
Sports Center.
One of the big dogs, one of the major time slots. And, unfortunately, that didn't work out well. And one thing that I definitely know better now than I knew then is you got to trust your instincts. And there were some things that happened early on that were red flags. And I'm not saying I would not have done anything differently. Like I still would have, because people have asked like, oh, if you had to do over again, would you just stay on His and Hers? I was like, but it kind of wasn't an option because we were getting a much bigger audience, a much bigger paycheck, not like a little bit big. I mean, like generational wealth big, right? So like, I'm not turning that down.
Listen, we can't afford to. If we don't have generational wealth, you got to take the generational wealth chances.
You got to take those chances. And we're talking about an audience that would triple the size of our current audience. We would go from a very small studio that was in a closet to being in ESPN's $125 million digital facility, a marketing campaign, commercials, like everything we ever wanted was a part of this deal. Except the creative. Except the creative. It is like we were on different pages from the beginning. And it was clear to me, even before our first show, is that, I see what happened. They thought they were getting the funny black people from the skits and didn't realize we black. All the way through. Okay? And they did not understand is that you will get this Coming to America skit and this Step Brother skit and this Anchorman skit, but you also gonna get this 15-minute conversation about Philando Castillo.
Right.
You also gonna get this 12 to 15-minute conversation about Colin Kaepernick. And then it was clear to us that like they weren't ready, and didn't know that when you have two black anchors put in that prominent position, it's going to attract the wolves. And, people came for us early and there were perceptions about our show we never got from underneath. And by the time we figured out a groove, they changed leadership. I didn't like the new leadership. And so I left. I mean, it was not, I know there was a common narrative or perception that I was kicked off SportsCenter. I wasn't, because it was guaranteed in my contract to do it. I had basically the equivalent of a no trade clause in my contract. I had to lift that to get off of SportsCenter, and that's how badly I wanted off of it.
Really? So was it? I know you say you'll do it again. Do you think all in all you appreciated how it went down, or it changed the way you saw yourself or decision? Because I've had bad things happen, but it helped me be like, oh, if I ever get this again, I won't do that. Has that happened? Did that happen for you?
I think that's why it's beneficial, because every broadcast experience after that, I went with I carried a little bit of the PTSD from SportsCenter in a good way, because now I know what it shouldn't look like, and I'm much more vocal about, hey, I'll do it, but I'm not doing it if that's involved. So I'm much more intentional about ownership of whatever situation that I'm in. Yeah. And being promised a certain creative. But also, and in this way it was good, is that it taught me to have some emotional distance from what I was doing. I don't want to fall in love again like I did at ESPN. Right. I don't want to do that again, because it just it didn't bring any balance to my life, and to be as invested as I was emotionally, I don't think is healthy. And so now I realize that, listen, to a large degree, all these networks and entities operate the same way. They're not any different. So for me to stress myself out about a system that is going to be hard to change is really the definition of doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So I was like, I'm not going to do that again. And because I do have a bit more emotional distance from some of the projects that I do, that it allows me to have a healthier attitude about doing it. So I would not ever trade doing it, despite how everything turned out, because I wouldn't be here sitting with you right now.
Yeah, that's true. I might not have found out you from the Orlando Sentinel.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it wouldn't happen.
I might have been like, we're going to have this columnist, the first one from the Orlando Sentinel on coming to the stage.
Yes. I mean, I might have still been slogging away on SportsCenter, and I don't think fulfilling my creative purpose. Yeah. Because I could have stayed on and done it, but especially after, the Trump controversy, like, there was a broken trust that was there, and I didn't like coming to work, and that was the first time I felt that in my entire career, and definitely my entire time at ESPN.